All right, Eric, welcome to Crew Conversations. I'm super excited to have you on with us today. And I know we're about to dive into a subject that you and I are both pretty passionate about. But before we do that, just give us an example here, a high-level overview of kind of your career journey so far from your side.
Sure. Yeah. I spent the first year out of college working for Black & Decker, selling power tools in the Midwest. And then 18 years after that, for 18 consecutive years, working for American Express in corporate payments. Took a 2-year hiatus and went to a startup in Silicon Valley by the name of Talia. And then actually went back to American Express for 4 years. And then most recently, I transitioned to a company called WEX, and I run their corporate payments division. WEX is a Portland, Maine-based payments company.
Awesome. And so in that journey so far, is there a job, I know you feel probably obligated to say the job you're currently in, but is there a pit stop in the career journey so far that was just really maybe a little bit more important or meaningful or sticks out for you so far?
I always go back to the first one, to be honest. I was a kid. I was 21 when I graduated from college. I graduated early because I wanted to get at it and start life. And I didn't have really any idea what I wanted to do. Wasn't a doctor or lawyer. And I recall there's Black & Decker was located in Towson, Maryland. And that's where I went to college. And the weekend after I graduated, I happened to run into a group of their executives at an offsite retreat. And I had my resume with me, paper printed out on the thick stock. And I handed it to one of the guys and he said, "I'll call you next week and we'll start talking." And within the next 30 days, I interviewed 3 times and I had that first opportunity to go to work. And so I always look back at that as, without that, I don't know, I could have gone a totally different direction. So I'm always really grateful and thankful that it happened and it unraveled like it did.
Yep. I can relate to that. So for this audience, that's actually how I got to know Eric is he gave me my first opportunity. So just to give you a little background on how Eric Frankovic sometimes operates, I'm a voiceover guy that nobody wanted to touch with no B2B experience back in 2007. Eric and I get connected. I think I've gone through 10 interviews trying to break my way into payments sales, because kind of like you, just trying to figure out a way to get a good job and pay the bills and kind of figure it out from there. And Eric and I had a conversation over the phone for, I think, 45 minutes. And I remember you asking me, how fast can you be in South Jersey, which is actually where I had gone to high school. So it's a cool concept. Okay, I'm going to get my job. I'm going to go back to where I went to high school. And I said, well, probably 60 or 90 days. And Eric said, well, how about next week? And I thought he was kidding. And then I recognized, based on conversations that were set up with me with other leaders that were in his circle, he was dead serious. And so I agree with you, man. The first job, it's pretty hard to not think about that one being the one we probably most recognize and think fondly of. So thank you for, by the way, live and in person.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into the subject here today, Eric, right? We want to talk about this whole concept of followership, which I actually wasn't even sure if followership is actually a word in the Webster's definition. I'm thinking it might be. I didn't check, but it's definitely something we talk about in leadership circles, in commercial cultures, and it's becoming ever more important in the new normal, I think, for a lot of folks. And so, but just give us your layman's version of how you view and define what followership is.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not a term in the dictionary, it's definitely a term that's developed over the last few years in the business world. Followership is just what it sounds like. It's the ability to, or the action of, following someone, and why you do it and why people kind of come together and sort of find common ground and stick with each other. To me, that's followership. So like, what's in it for you, and how do I lead, and how do I feel about leading, and do those intersections cross? And if they do, you create this cool networking type followership that I think is critical to building successful organizations these days.
Yeah. Now, is this something that you kind of feel like you always have done well as a leader, or do you feel like you've evolved with your focus on this? I mean, just talk about how natural you feel like it came for you.
No, yeah, like absolutely not. First few years of working and leading teams, I made mistakes, just like every new leader. And then I remember being probably like 5 years in or 4 years into leadership. And I got to see a guy, I worked in his organization, a guy named Tom Pajero, and we're at a sales meeting and he's on stage. And this was my first exposure to him. And he was talking about, I don't even remember what, but I remember the people around me were excited and locked in. And the person sitting next to me goes, I'd run through a wall for that guy. And that's when it clicked. I was like, well, what makes him so special, right? Why would someone say I would run through a wall for another human being, especially at work? And it wasn't that he was the smartest guy ever in the room. He was a good speaker, but that wasn't it. It was this intangible like care that he had. He genuinely cared for his people and his team, and there were no conditions to that, right? Like if you showed up and you worked hard, like that was all you had to do to be on the inside of his circle. And it's the first time I really had seen that, and it sparked something in me. And I think about that person, and I think about that speech that he was giving often as I think about my team and building a new team.
Wow. Awesome example. I know of Tom. I don't know him personally, but I've heard so many similar stories. You're right. And this kind of stuff, it kind of leaves a trail of a legacy for you as a leader too, yeah. Right? These are the stories that people share. It's not why they're doing it, because to your point, the pickup there I got from you on that was he just unconditionally cared about people, right? I think that it's easy as leaders to always conditionally care, based on results, based on how much they scratch your back or try to make you look good or whatever it may be, right? Yeah. There's a lot of conditions you can kind of tie your affinity towards folks that are working with you towards, but can you do it unconditionally? And can people sense that, which means even through bad times, even through struggling times and all of that. So that's interesting. So day to day then, so you've gotten that example was painted for you and it vividly stuck with you through your career. And then on a day-to-day basis, you're busy as crap, right? So how do you stay in tune with that when your email box is overloaded and there's deadlines from a million directions and there's personal and right? I mean, how do you keep that? I think we all believe in that, but I think the hard part is keeping it front of mind and not letting go of it in the busyness. Any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I get sucked into the rabbit hole like anybody else. Just trying to complete tasks or boss please, or keep up with a job that has growing demands. And if you think about what we just went through with COVID and being locked in our homes for 2 years, and now we're back out, and the work environment has really changed. We're not in this office space where you can march up and down and show up and be high-fiving your employees. So it's gotten more difficult to create followership and to stay in tune with people. The only way to do it is to fail and constantly pull yourself out of the failure. So there'll be times, at least 2 or 3 times a month, where I lose connectivity with people. I'm so wrapped up in a spreadsheet or a sales pitch that we're doing or whatever it is, some sort of internal planning for the next year. And the only thing that brings me back is connecting with people. So whether that's a phone call with an old friend or colleague, whether that's meeting somebody new in the organization, or even, maybe more importantly, reaching outside of your current organization into other organizations and just strike up conversations. Find people that are doing similar things to you and ask questions. So I'm by no means a role model for followership, but it's something that I think is important. It has to be worked at. And just accept, as humans, we're going to stumble and fall all the time. You have to figure out ways to pull yourself back to where what is important. And I would say, Adam, the other thing is it's not universally accepted that followership is a really important management skill. I was talking to a finance guy recently, and for some reason we get caught on this conversation around what makes the best general manager or best leader. And of course, the finance slant was, well, P&L recognition and knowledge, being able to walk yourself around the P&L, knowing all the levers. Like that doesn't even occur to me to be, I know it's important, but it doesn't even occur to me to be a top 5 leadership trait. Like that's why we have finance teams. Like I want to focus on people. I want to focus on what's important to them, developing their career, helping them move along the career path. Whether that's with me or not, it's not as important. But if we're focused on other people and developing them, I feel like the return is automatic. You will get a return in your job. And in my case, you feel a lot more fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you just ended with that, because as you were explaining that what I really think is interesting that people that are listening should think about is you're saying that you also use it as a method of self-fulfillment, right? It's not self-serving, but the reality is many people, and I know myself included, when you end up tuning out and turning to people again and putting your focus on them, that's when the fulfillment part that a lot of times we can feel like we're missing through the busyness, through the challenges, through the adversity, through the stress, gets depleted. And so it's a recharge. So by focusing on others, coincidentally, you actually give yourself the juice as well. You're right. Harder than ever, right?
I look at guys like you, and you started with the story. You were a voiceover guy. And when I remember talking to you all those years ago, and I saw something in you, I knew you were driven, I knew you cared. And so, we gave you a shot, and it panned out. You were our number one salesperson for years, and then went on to be one of our number one leaders. I have another guy that, was passed over twice at a company that I worked with, just sort of like discarded. I ended up giving him a job, and, now he runs a 9,000 person organization at a major company. And I'm focused and concerned about my life and my career, but looking out and thinking like, wow, I helped these guys, to some extent, I started them on their way. It brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. No, well, hey, thank you for those words. Good leaders in the beginning helped me get out of the gate there. And I mean, I just knowing you personally, I know of so many people that have talked about stories and examples of you living what we're talking about here and helping them, not just when they were in your orbit, by the way, but a lot of times afterwards. And I think that's the hard part too, right? I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, it's easy to be focused on the followership, again, when it matters to you in the confined walls of whatever company and organization and brand you're living in. But how do you stay connected to that follower-ship to people? Because this world's small, man, right? And we ain't staying in our jobs for 20 to 30 years anymore. So I think people need to remind themselves of that now. Whoever you're running by right now, you're probably going to see in another, 360 days or so in some way, shape, or form. So how do you maintain the followership after the job?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's probably the most difficult thing to do. As you're talking, I was thinking about sort of like one variation of followership, which is you get these people that are working in an organization, and they're essentially working well and making themselves successful, which makes you successful. There's this really common trait in corporate America that I think all of us have seen is when that happens, what does the leader do? They put their thumb on the person. They don't want that person promoted or to move because that person's a producer and they're a producer for them. So let's keep that person where they are, and let's keep the gravy train running. I had a leader a few years ago, Susan Chapman Hughes, and I changed my life in the way I lead people, in the sense that she taught me that an important part of followership is letting people go. And when I moved from American Express to that company, Talia, it was basically, as I was working for her, she encouraged me to look outside the company and, go find what your passion is, go explore, go continue to develop. She wasn't saying, hey, you're good at what you're doing, I like you, we get along, stay where you are. She gave me the wings to go out and find and do new things. So I'm grateful not only for that opportunity, but for the lesson that it taught me. Like, you can't hold people down, and you will be, even if they leave your organization, if you help people find that next rung, you're setting yourself up for years and years of success. So it doesn't exactly get to your question. The only way to get to your question is it's hard work. You have to make time, 10% of your time, maybe it's a couple hours a week that you dedicate, like anything else, to reaching out and checking in and touching base. And it doesn't mean everyone you come in contact with, you have to touch base or check in with, but the people that show you that they want to be part of this. Those are the people. And it doesn't make them good or bad. It doesn't make the people that don't want to be part of your followership bad. It just means that those are not necessarily people you need to worry about checking in with as much. Like, take care of the flock or the people that are, focused on giving back and doing the same thing you're doing, investing in them. They're investing in other people. Like, that's the community I want to build. Those are the people I want to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a realistic point you bring up there. You can't be this for everyone, right? I mean, it's impossible. And so I think, there's a lot of people, if you start focusing and fixating on the benefits of followership and you're trying to deploy that at your best ability as a leader, you try and do it for everyone. And that's not necessarily what we're saying here. What you're saying is you do it for the people that seem like they want that from you, right? Yeah. And you do it authentically. And when it catches with folks, you sink in. You work with them, you support them as well as support, meaning you let them go or you encourage them to go. And then it kind of, like you said, it's this virtuous cycle that comes back to you. People notice that. The individual clearly notices it and remembers it. And then even people around them, I think, notice when a leader is not blocking and really unleashing people in their orbit or outside, which is powerful. So, you talked about that was like early on in the career, it wasn't quite as natural, right? You kind of learn that, whoa, the way I lead more and more through others is kind of by getting this thing right, this followership piece right. It's the focus on people, taking the people from the nice to have to the gotta have category, like you were mentioning. What of those do you think, even later in your career, maybe, despite even having good intent, do you feel like there was a time or a moment or a situation that sticks out where you kind of fell off the wagon with this, made a mistake? I mean, is there any, we're all imperfect. Do you feel, does anything kind of stick out for you that was something that brought you back and you kind of learned your lesson again on the benefit of followership?
No, I think that when you ask that question, I think back to my time at the small company, and I was convinced that if I brought enough people together, I could make anything work. It didn't necessarily, at the time, I wasn't always thinking about like, well, is this the best move for this person? I was thinking, hey, we're going to be great together as a team and we'll figure it out. And so, I think it's important to always pause and ask yourself, why are you doing this? Is it for you selfishly, or is it really for that person? Are you so, not all of us are so altruistic where we're always sort of, and I'm not, you have to kind of check yourself and pull yourself back from that from time to time. It is about the people and not about your personal goal or your personal intentions or your figuring it out later. It has to make sense. And it's a dangerous thing, followership, because what I found is you can talk people into doing a lot of things. And if they trust you and they believe in you, they'll take that leap. You have to check yourself and make sure it's the right thing for each individual as you're going through the process.
Wow. That was, in my opinion, that's my favorite part so far of this conversation, because I haven't thought about that too much when I think about followership, but the privilege and the responsibility that goes with that, right? I mean, when people are saying they're willing to run through walls for other people, that's a privilege, but it's also a big responsibility. Yeah. And to your point, sometimes we do. Most great leaders are borderline hyperachievers, if not full-fledged ones. They're extremely driven, ambitious, right? And they think they can accomplish anything, especially when they know they can do it with others. And so that true sinking into your core when you're dealing with the human beings that you're pulling in with you ain't easy, but the checking of it is really, really sound and wise advice, man. That was powerful from my side. So Eric, we're thinking about, the next phase of career here, and this is a new normal that that's continuing to evolve. We're going from one major distraction in our commercial world of the pandemic era into a possible new one here of a recession. You've been through a few of these challenges in that stint of the career that you mentioned. But when you're thinking about, legacy, and I know that's not something that again, that sounds self-serving, but there is something that we're leaving behind when we're leading. That's a responsibility we have. And so for you, when you think about legacy, when you think about how people remember you, talk about you, or view you, when you're finally, hopefully, relaxing, on the Jersey Shore, what are you hoping people think and say? What's the most important thing for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, if I'm remembered for, he was a smart guy that was really hardworking, loved his family, and he was good to people. I think that's all I could ask for. I want to be remembered as someone that truly cared about the people that were involved in the business, and made mistakes, but always sort of tried to recover and err to the side of taking care of people, making sure that people are being brought along. I think that there's no greater legacy that you can build.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to your initial definition that I asked you to define on this whole concept of followership. It's clear that if you just focus on that, you're pretty likely to leave a pretty impressive legacy that is the most important stuff that a lot of people think about when they reflect on careers. So,
and if you think about the flip side, Adam, like what's like being the greatest corporate payments guy, that's good and all, but I don't know that like my kids and wife at my funeral one day would be really proud. So I mean, there's no higher mission than to take care of people.
Yeah. And while you're the corporate payments guy and it's not necessarily labeled in like life-changing feeling work, I think what we've gone through today is when we think about what we do and the privilege and the responsibility components of leading people and focusing on them and driving authentic followership for the right reasons, you actually do have the chance to impact and truly positively change people's lives from your first job opportunity, right, all the way through the final phase where you really, I think about that more and more every day as kind of the years clip on. So, Eric, we've started this, obviously, this community, this concept of crew, and we're trying to bring together leaders like you where we can keep this stuff top of mind, right? I mean, it's an atmosphere we're trying to swirl around all the stuff that supports leaders at the whole person level so that they can, first and foremost, feel supported for themselves. And then that means they go back into their teams and their families, communities, and truly be the leaders that we know we're all capable of being when we're not in our own way, not in our own head and stuff. I mean, but what was your reason for, taking a chance on a new community concept like this? What's your reason for why you're kind of, joining us at Crew?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the power of networking, and it's a difficult thing to do. And what I found in my own life is that I do have a network, but it's relatively small, like the people that I go to ask for advice. And for the same reason, diversity is important. Getting the diversity of thought when you have problems, issues, when you feel a certain way. If you only have a limited pool of people to go to, you're not putting yourself in the best position. So I really feel like this idea that Crew that you have and your father has on Crew is so powerful because it allows you to connect with a much broader group of people. Maybe like-minded, maybe not, maybe smarter than you, maybe not, maybe, better at certain areas of the world than you are. It just allows you to plug into a much broader network instantly. So that's the advantage to me. And, I'm really kind of looking forward to watching it grow and evolve as we get into it. And I think just even these videos, just having some sort of repository of advice that you can go to and say, okay, this is something that I'm facing or I have questions about. I see that this video is labeled that. What does this person think? And you don't have to agree. And you can sort of, hang up on these videos and say, that was useless or that. But if it resonates with anyone, I think it becomes really powerful. So it's the network effect is really why I believe so much in what we're doing here.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. That, to your point, I think that's a big part of the core of what we're trying to deliver and build here. And, I view that every one of you, there's just a plethora of information and insight and experiences and wisdom from learnings, from mistakes, from all of that, from successes. And I just don't think we ask enough, right? And again, we're all moving around so fast and we're not staying in jobs quite as long anymore. And so to create authentic atmospheres and connections and relationships where we really let that wisdom, right, get unleashed and we listen to it and we bounce it off of each other. I think it's powerful. I think at a certain phase of your career, that is possibly more impactful than your typical thought of improvement, skill improvement, leadership development, right? I think that peer-to-peer thoughts and growth is important. And I know something that I need and crave. So appreciate you taking the leap of faith with us. And honestly, just I'm super thankful that you took the time. We know how busy everyone is. And so thank you for having this crew conversation with us, Eric. And for the record, on the concept of followership and your example with Pajero there, I am one of those guys that would run through a wall for this guy, Eric Frankovic. So he's right. That is, I think, that's my takeaway image of what happens when either you have been somebody that's following another individual or you're fortunate enough to be the leader that creates that followership with somebody else. Hope everybody enjoyed this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Crew Conversations.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Crew Conversations. These conversations are for leaders, between leaders, and by leaders to inspire you to grow into the type of leader you want to become.